The Roald Dahl Collection, Stories and Verse from the world's greatest storyteller. The Millions. Little Billy's mother was always telling him exactly what he was allowed to do and what he was not allowed to do. All the things he was allowed to do were boring. All the things he was not allowed to do were exciting. One of the things he was never allowed to do was the most exciting of them all. Was to go out through the garden gate all by himself and explore the world beyond. On this summer afternoon, little Billy was kneeling on a chair in the living room, gazing out through the window at the wonderful world beyond his mother. His mother was in the kitchen doing the ironing, and although the door was open, she couldn't see him. Every now and again, his mother would call out to him, saying, "Little Billy, what are you up to in there?" And little Billy would always call back and say, "I'm being good, Mummy." But little Billy was awfully tired of being good. Through the window, not so very far, he could see something big, black, secret wood. That was the forest of sin. It was something he had always longed to explore. His mother had told him that even grown-ups were frightened of going to the forest of sin. As you can see, the little boy staring out through the window to the dark tree, to the forest of sin. She recited a poem to him that was well known in the district. It went like this: "Beware, beware, the forest of sin. None come out, but many go in." "Why don't they come out?" little Billy asked her. "What happens to them in the wood?" "The wood," his mother said, "is full of bloodthirsty wild beasts in the world." "You mean tigers and lions?" little Billy asked. "Much worse than that," his mother said. "What's worse than tigers and lions, Mummy?" "Whangdoodles are worse," his mother said, "and hornswogglers and swazzlewangers and vermicious knids, and worst of all is the terrible blood-sucking, tooth-picking, tooth-plucking, stone-huckling splitter. There's one of them in there too." "A splitter, Mummy?" "Of course. And when the splitter chases after you, he blows clouds of smoke out of his nose." "Would he eat me up?" little Billy asked. "In one gulp," his mother said. Little Billy did not believe a word of this. He guessed his mother was making it all up, so just to frighten him and to stop him ever going out of the house alone. And now little Billy was kneeling on the chair, gazing with longing through the window at the famous forest of sin. "Little Billy," his mother called out from the kitchen. "What are you doing?" "I'm being good, Mummy," little Billy called back. Just then, a funny thing happened. Little Billy began to hear somebody whispering in his ear. He knew exactly who it was. It was the devil The devil always started whispering to him when he was especially bored. It would be easy, the devil was whispering, to climb out through the window. No one would see you. And in a jiffy, you would be in the garden. And another jiffy, you would be through the front gate. In yet another jiffy, you would be exploring the marvelous forest of sin, all by yourself. It is a super place. Do not believe one word of what she says about wrongdoers and hornswogglers and snozzwonglers and vicious knids and the terrible blood-sucking, tooth-puckling, stone-hitting spitter. There are no such things. What is in there? Little Billy whispered. Wild strawberries, the devil whispered back. The whole floor of the forest is carpeted with wild strawberries. One of them, luscious and red, ripe, juicy ripe. Go and see for yourself. The devil whispered softly into the little Billy's ear. On that sunny summer afternoon, then the next moment, little Billy had opened the window and was climbing out. In a jiffy, he had dropped silently onto the flower bed below. In another jiffy, he was through the garden gate, and in yet another jiffy, he was standing at the very edge of the great, big, dark forest of sin. He had made it. He had got out. He had got there. And now the forest was all his to explore. Was he nervous? What? Who said anything about being nervous? Hornswogglers, wormsuckers, kids. What sort of rubbish was that? Little Billy hesitated. I'm not nervous, he said. I'm not the least bit nervous. Not me. Very, very slowly he walked into the great forest giant. Giant trees were soon surrounding him, all on sides, and their branches made an almost solid roof behind his head, blotting out the sky here, and the little shafts of sunlight shone through the gaps in the roof. As you can see, the little kid staring through the dark forest of sin. There was not a sound anywhere. It was like being among the dead men in an enormous empty green cathedral. When he had ventured some distance into the forest, little Billy stopped and stood quiet, still, listening. He could hear nothing at all. There was absolute silence. Or was there? Hold on just 1 second. What was that? Little Billy flicked his head around and stared into the everlasting gloom and doom of the forest. There it was again. There was no mistaking in this time. Far away, there came a very faint, whiffing noise, like a small gustly wind blowing through the trees. Then it grew louder. Every second, it was growing louder. Suddenly, it was no longer a small wind. It was a fearsome, whooshing, whiffling, snorting noise that sounded as though some giant creature was breathing heavily its nose as it galloped towards him. Little Billy turned and ran. Little Billy ran faster than he had ever ran in his life before. But the whooshing, swiffling, snorting noise that was coming after him was getting louder. This meant that the thing, maker of the noise, the galloping creature, was getting closer. It was catching him up. Run, little Billy, run, run, run! He dodged around massive trees. He skipped over roots and brambles. He bent low to flash under boughs and bushes. He had wings on his feet. He ran so fast, but still the fearsome whooshing, whiffling, snorting noise grew louder and louder and louder as it came closer and closer. Little Billy glanced back over his shoulder, and now, in the distance, he saw a sight that froze his blood and made icicles in his veins. What he saw, two mighty puffs of orange-red smoke billowing and rolling through the trees in his direction. They were followed by, looking back into the red smoke, that tiny little there. Two more, whoosh, whoosh, and then two more, whoosh, whoosh. And there must surely be coming, little Billy told himself, from the two nose holes of some galloping, panting beast that had smelled him out and was coming after him. His mother's words began drumming once again in his head. Beware, beware, the forest of sin. None come out, but many go in. It's Spittler, for sure, little Billy cried out. Mummy said the Spittlers blow smoke when it chases you. This one is blowing smoke. It's the terrible, blood-suckling, tooth-picking, stone-huckling Spittler. And soon it will catch me up, and I'll be blood-sucked and tooth-puckled and stone-buckled and wedged up into tiny pieces, and then the Spittler will spit me out in a cloud of smoke, and that will be the end of me. Little Billy was running with the speed of an arrow, but each time he glanced over his shoulder, the puffs of orange-red smoky breath had gotten closer. They were so close he could feel the wind of them on the back of his neck, and the noise, it was deafening in his ears. This fearsome whooshing, whiffling, panting noise. Woomph, woomph, it went. Woomph, 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 woomph. It was like the noise by a steam locomotive pulling out from a station. Then suddenly, and heard another noise, was somehow more fearsome. It was the pounding of gigantic galloping hooves on the floor of the forest. He glanced around again, but the thing, the beast, the monster, or whatever it was, hidden from his sight by the smoke. It shot out as it galloped forward. The smoky breath was billowing all around him. Now he could feel its hotness. Worse still, he could smell its smell. The smell was disgusting. It was the stench that comes up deep inside the tummy of a meat-eating animal. "Mummy!" he cried out. "Save me!" Suddenly, directly in front of him, little Billy saw the trunk of an enormous tree. This tree was different from the others because it had branches hanging down very low. While still running, he made a frantic jump for its lowest branch. He caught it and pulled himself up. Then he grabbed the next branch above his head and pulled himself up again, then again, then again, climbing only when he was too exhausted to climb any higher. He looked up, but even now he couldn't see the top of the giant tree. It seemed to go on forever. He looked down. He couldn't see the top of the giant tree. He couldn't see the ground either. He was in the world of green leaves and thick, smooth branches with no earth or sky in sight. The snorting, smelly smoke billowing beast was miles away down below. Somewhere he couldn't even hear it anymore. Little Billy found a comfortable place where two big branches came together, and he sat down to rest for the moment. At any rate, he was safe. Then something peculiar happened. There was a big smooth branch very close to where patch of bark on his branch was beginning to move. It was a very small patch, out of the size of a postage stamp, and the two sides of it seemed to be splitting down the middle of an opening slowly towards, like a pair of shuttering on some tiny windows. Little Billy sat staring at this extraordinary thing, and at once a strange, uncomfortable feeling came over him. It felt as though the tree he was sitting in, and the green leaves all around him belonged to another world. This is him looking at the small patch in the bark. I think you can't see it, but it's there. Belonged to another world altogether, and that he was a trespasser. Who had no right to be where he was. He watched intently as the tiny shutters of the tree bark opened wider and wider. And when they were fully open, they revealed a small, squarish window set neatly in the curve of the big branch. There was some sort of yellowish glow coming from deep inside the window. The very next thing little Billy saw was a tiny face at the window. It had appeared suddenly from nowhere, and it was the face of an extremely old man with white hair. Little Billy could see this clearly. Despite the fact that the whole of the tiny man's head was no larger than a pea, this ancient miniature face was staring straight at little Billy with the most serve expression on it. The skin was on the face was deeply wrinkled. All over, the eyes were as bright as two stars. Now something even more peculiar began to happen. All around him, not only on the huge main trunk of the tree, but also on the big branches that grew out of it, other tiny windows were opening. And tiny faces were peering out. Some of these faces belonged to men and others clearly women. Here and there, the head of a child was seen peering over a windowsill. The heads of these children were no more than 20 small windowsills. The head of the children were no larger than matchsticks. In the end, there must have been more than 20 small windows all around where little Billy was sitting. And from each window, these amazing little faces were peering out. No sound came from the windows. The faces were silent, unmoving, almost ghost-like. This is the old man staring from the window. Now, the tiny old man in the window, nearest to Billy, seemed to be saying something, but his voice was soft and whispering. Little Billy had to lean up close to catch his words. "You're in a bit of a tweezler, aren't you?" the voice was saying. "You can't go down again, because if you do, you'll be guzzled up at once. But you can't possibly sit up here forever either." I know, little Billy gasped. "Don't shout," the tiny man said. "I'm not shouting," little Billy gasped. "Talk softer," the tiny man said. "If you talk too loud, your voice will blow me away." But who are you?" little Billy asked, taking care to speak very softly this time. "We are the Mimpins," the tiny man said, "and we own this wood. I shall come closer, then you will hear me better." The old Mimpin climbed out of his window and walked straight to the big, steeply sloping branch, then up another branch until he found a place only a few inches away from Billy's face. It was amazing to see him walking up and down these almost vertical branches without the slightest trouble. It was like seeing someone walking up and down a wall. "How on earth do you do that?" little Billy asked. "Suction boots," the Mimpin said. "We all wear them. You can't live in trees without suction boots." On his feet, he was wearing tiny green boots, rather like miniature wellies. His clothes were curiously old-fashioned, mostly brown and black, the sort of thing were 200 or 300 years ago. Suddenly, all the Mimpins, men, women, and children, were climbing out of their woods and making their way towards little Billy. Their suction boots seemed to allow them to walk up and down the steepest branches with greatest ease. And some were even walking upside down underneath the branches. All of them were wearing these old-fashioned clothes from hundreds of years ago, and several had on very peculiar hats and bonnets. They stood or sat in groups, all of the branches around little Billy, staring at him as though he was someone from outer space. But do all of you actually live inside this tree? Little Billy asked. The old Mimpin said, all the trees in this forest are hollow, not just this one, but all of them. Thousands and thousands. This one, but all of them inside thousands of Mimpins are living. These great trees are filled with rooms and staircases, not just the big main trunk, but in most of the other branches as well. This is Mimpin Forest. It is not only the one. It is not only the one in England. Could I peep inside? Little Billy said. Of course, of course. The old Mimpin said. Put your eye close to that window. He pointed to the one he had just come out of. Little Billy shifted his position and placed one eye right up against the square hole that was no bigger than a postage stamp. This is the boy staring into the little window full of house furniture. What he now saw was quite marvelous. He saw a room that was lit by a pale yellow light of some sort, and it was furnished with beautiful made miniature chairs, and a table. To one side was a four-poster bed. It was like one of those rooms little Billy had once seen in Queen's Doll's house at Windsor Castle. It's beautiful, little Billy said. Are they as lovely as this one? Most are smaller. The old Mimpin said, this one is very grand, because I am the ruler of this tree. My name is Don Minnie. What is yours? Mine is Little Billy, Little Billy said. Green Little Billy. Greetings, Little Billy, Don Minnie said. You are welcome to look into some of the other rooms if you wish. We are very proud of them. All the other Mimpin families wanted to show little Billy their own rooms. They rushed out along the branches, calling out, come and see mine. Please, come and see mine. Little Billy began climbing about and peeping into the tiny windows. Through one window he saw a bathroom, just like his own at home, only thousands times smaller. And through another he saw a classroom with lots of tiny desks and a blackboard at one end. At one end of the room was lots of tiny desks and blackboard. At one end in every room there was a stairway in one corner leading to the room above. As little Billy went from window to window, the Mimpins followed him, clustering round and smiling at his exclamations of wonder. They're all absolutely marvelous, he said. They're much nicer than our rooms at home. When the sightseeing tour was over, little Billy sat down again on a large branch and said to the whole company of Mimpins, look, I've had a lovely time with you all, but How how am I ever going to get home again? My mother. My mother will be going crazy. You you can't. You can't get down from this tree, Domini said. I've told you that. If you're stupid enough to try it, you'll be eaten up in 5 seconds. Is it the splitter? Billy asked. It is the terrible blood-sucking, tooth-plucking, stone-picking splitter. I've heard of any splitter, Domini said. The one waiting for you. Down there is fearsome Gruncher, the red, hot, smoke, blenching Gruncher. He grunches up everything in the forest. That's why we have to live up here. He has grunched up hundreds of humans and literally millions of mimpins. What makes him so dangerous is his amazing and magical nose. His nose can smell out a human or mimpin, any other animal, from 10 miles away. Then he gallops towards it at terrific speed. He can never see anything in front of him because of all the smoke. He blenches out from his nose and mouth, but that doesn't bother him. His nose tells him exactly where to go. Why does he blow out all that smoke? Little Billy asked. Because he is a red, hot fire in his belly, Don Manny said. The gruncher likes his meat roasted, and the fire roasts it all. As it goes down, look, Little Billy said. Gruncher or no gruncher, I've simply got to get home. I've simply got to get home. I beg you, Don Manny said. The gruncher knows you're up here. He's down there, waiting for you. Climb down a bit with me. I'll show you. Don Manny walked easily straight down the side of the great tree trunk. Little Billy climbed carefully down after him, from one branch to the next. Soon, below them, they began to smell the revolting, hot stench of the gruncher's breath, and the orange-red smoke was now billowing up into the lower branches in thick clouds. What does he look like? Little Billy whispered. Nobody knows, Don Manny answered. He makes so much steam and smoke, you can never see him. If you are behind him, you can sometimes catch a glimpse of his little bits of him, because all the smoke is blown out in the front. Some mimpins say that have seen his black legs and huge black and very hairy, sharp shaped like lions' legs, but 10 times as huge, as big, and it rumored that his head is like an enormous crocodile's head, with rows and rows of sharp teeth, pointed teeth. Nobody really knows. Mind you, he must have gigantic nose holes to be able to blow out all that smoke. That's him looking at Don Manny, who's climbing down the tree. They stayed, still listening, and they could hear the gruncher pawing the ground at the base of the tree with his giant hooves and snorting with greed. He smells you, Don Manny said. He knows you aren't far away. He'll wait for he'll wait forever to he smells you. He'll wait forever to get you now. He adores humans and he doesn't catch them very often. Humans are like strawberries and cream to him. You see, for months he's been living on a diet of mimpins. And 1,000 mimpins is not even a snack for him. The brute is ravenous. Little Billy and Don Minnie climbed back up the tree to where all the other mimpins were gathered. They seemed glad to see little Billy come safely back. Stayed up here with us, they said to him. We'll look after you. Just then, a big blue swallow alighted on a branch not far away, and little Billy saw a mother mimpin and two her children climb casually onto the swallow's back. Then the swallow took off and flew away with its passengers seated comfortably between its wings. Good heavens! Cried little Billy. Is that a special tame bird? Not at all, Don Minnie said. We know all the birds. The birds are our